Hello and welcome again to Naked Insider episode 6, and my name is Boz Fisher and I have here
Peter Natterer.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Pleasure is.
Today's video is all about trust. Now, I've actually done a trust video with Sean Affair at the virtual pub, but that was very much on a slightly different topic. Today's subject about trust is really, we want to try and break it down and actually give you the foundations of what it is. So Peter, I'll hand it over to you. What is trust?
Trust is the ability to believe in somebody that they will do exactly what it is that they say they will do. And that really is the core foundation of both trust itself and how to build trust in itself.
It is exceedingly important.
Yes, it is very important.
Because it's the foundation in terms of how we interact with each other.
Correct.
Anything that we do, I mean, whether it be online or physical, is very much built on trust.
It is, absolutely.
So how do we engender trust?
Trust is built by saying what you're going to do and then doing what you said you were going to do. It's built on small increments. And the way to build the trust ramp, as I call it, is to start with a small incremental things that you say you're going to do, and then just become more and more demonstrable that you are capable of handling the bigger things. And if you're it's a universal given that if you're able to be trusted on the small things, you're also eventually able to be trusted on the big things as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's look at the reverse.
Yes.
So mistrust. So how do you break trust?
Simple. Don't do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
That will put a halt to trust very quickly.
Okay.
Yes.
What is, for example, suspicion?
Suspicion is a doubt. Suspicion is where you don't believe that something is going to be panning out as it's been told to you that it will be panning out.
Yeah.
And suspicion usually has some kind of factor behind it which gives you cause to think that this is not going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah.
It's so important to understand those fundamentals. So here's a good question for you.
Yep.
So what is the quickest way to potentially bring insider risk into the equation?
Oh, very simple. Don't create an organization of mistrust. If everybody is mistrusting everyone else, then it creates a toxic environment, and that toxic environment can lead to, I guess you could call it acting out. People can act out, whether that's deliberate or whether that's carelessness or whether that's anything inside of that scale in between.
Can you give an example?
So, for instance, if an executive comes down to John and says, "Hey, John, we must talk about the pay rise. You've been doing a fantastic job." And John goes, "Fantastic, pay rise, like it." And a day goes by, and a week goes by, and a month goes by, and John still hasn't heard anything. This is a breach of trust. So the executive has obviously had things on their plate. I mean, there's lots of excuses.
Correct.
But it comes down to it. There is a discipline involved in generating and creating trust. And that is, when you said it, you also then need to follow it up and say, this is how we're going to proceed.
Yes. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Broken promises
Yes.
definitely lead to mistrust.
Yes, and question marks.
Correct. Now, what I want to do is drive into more the nitty-gritty, or the nuts and bolts, as what one would say, of what trust is. And I've written a lot about it in my articles, and it's basically broken down into two variables. One is character.
Yes.
And I'll explain in a second. And the other one is more about the results.
Yes.
And we tend to hire people based on their results, but we don't actually understand who the character is. So what do I mean by character? So it's driven by two key variables. One is what we call is the integrity.
Yes.
And the way I look at it is more about, walking the talk, but
yes.
How would you see it?
How
would you define it?
Another word comes up as honesty.
Yes.
Absolutely. And honesty is oftentimes very easily verifiable as well too.
Yes. And the second one is around intent, which is, I think, that's about motivation.
Correct.
The mutual benefit. Is there anything that you would add to that?
Intent can be very easily disguised, but it's also something that can be engendered. So by creating an environment where there's always positive intent, you then create a positive intent in all of the people that are part of that organization.
Correct. So we've got character, and then on the other side we've got, as I said, the person, which we can identify because we understand what they're capable.
Yes.
So based on maybe on their skills,
Yep.
on their resume, the history, the references, and the other important, which you talk quite a bit about, is around the results. So
Yes.
if they say something that they were going to do they actually deliver on those results?
Yes.
So trust, therefore, is built on the actual character and basically about the capability of that person. So if any of those are not delivered,
Yes.
or if any of them are sort of negative in value,
Yes.
then trust becomes mistrust, or
Exactly.
and so forth.
Exactly.
So then the question is, then what is the challenge? So when an organization says, okay, I want to hire employees, what are the challenges for them in hiring good employees?
I think the first thing is the reputation of the organization, because the reputation of the organization will attract people that resonate with the vibration of that.
Correct.
Vibration is
Yeah.
a very new age word,
Yes,
but
yes.
like attracts like. I mean,
Correct.
that's a fairly universal aphorism. What you'll find is that if you create a structure, an organization that has clear intent, clear trust, clear purpose, then you will attract people with clarity of intent, structure, and purpose.
Correct.
That's the first one.
Yeah. And then, so the first part was more about, hiring good people.
Correct.
But what I really meant is, how do we know that we've hired the trustworthy people?
You look at them over a period of time and see if they perform according to the small tasks that you've given them, and then give them more and more responsibility. I mean, there is a reason why there's a 3-month probation period, and a lot of people in many organizations.
Yes.
But a lot of people essentially say, okay, we've done that, we'll set and forget. If there's, if we haven't had a screaming match in the lunchroom, then we'll sign on. I think that it needs a little bit more attention to how that person is moving, less on process, and more on how that person is actually performing inside of the organization.
Yeah, but I think they also need to somehow, I'm not sure if this is the right word, delve into more of the character. So they're
Yes.
really, it's so hard and difficult to understand what's their intention.
Exactly.
All right?
Exactly.
So, what happens, you hire an employee and you're giving them the keys to the kingdom.
Yes.
So you've engaged the trust from the employer's side of things.
Yes.
And you're hoping the employee will do the right thing by
Yes.
you. So you expect them to be loyal, you expect them to be hardworking,
Yes.
and you expect them to
Yes.
be trustworthy.
Yes.
The question is, we don't know who they are.
No.
And I'll give you an example. The ex-CTO of Telstra fabricated a resume. So that is a challenge for any organization.
Yes.
And we also know from studies that, for example, people commit fraud with the organization. They've stayed for quite a lengthy period within the organization
Yes.
before they even start committing fraud.
Yes.
So they've really got the trust of the organization,
They have.
and they got the keys to the kingdom.
Yes.
And they thought they could do whatever they want.
Yes. And also, it gets back to the values and the beliefs that those people bring to the organisation. There is a tendency to let people operate inside of their own environment, and that then creates the ability, the vacuum in which these kinds of behaviours can start becoming animated without flagging anything.
Yeah.
It really requires a two-way interaction of trust, because trust engenders trust.
Correct.
And it is much harder inside of a trust modeling organisation to breach trust than it is inside of an organisation where things just slide off the table or there's active backstabbing going on.
Correct.
Yeah.
And which leads me to the point where that also dominates the question of what is the organization culture, and
Correct.
how does that lend itself to the trust equation.
Exactly. The organisation culture is all about how comfortable, how safe, actually, in a much more visceral sense, how safe a person fields inside of an organization. Do they watch their back, or can they rely on their team members? Can they rely on the executives to follow through or back them up? This is all contributed to culture.
Excellent. So we've come to the key conclusion, but I still have two more questions
Sure.
to ask you. What is the key takeaway from this discussion about trust?
The biggest takeaway is that what you model is what you get. If you model trust, if you model the right application of trust, you will tend to get that back. And it's a very simple thing to say, but it's also it requires a certain amount of discipline. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I haven't got time for this," or "I haven't got time for that." These are the key building blocks. If you want to have trust from the grassroots, then the grassroots needs to be able to trust into the upper management as well too.
Totally agree. So how would we be able to help them? So if an organization came knocking on the door, what are some of the core elements that we could actually engage with them?
Well, trust is an exercise that you can learn how to engender. There are certain steps, there are certain building blocks that you can take to create the trust ladder, or the trust ramp as I call it. And these are teachable skills.
Yeah.
So I would suggest come to Naked Insider and have a chat to us about our courses on how to build trust, the nuts and bolts of how to build trust.
Yep. So there you have it. So if you're looking for an environment in terms of building and engendering trust, reach out to us through the website and so forth, and we will follow that up with you. Any last questions that maybe I should have asked, and maybe not, but
trust is a big topic.
It is,
and it's very easy to talk about it very quickly on a video.
Oh yes,
but it's worth investing the time into. You'll find that if you have an organization that runs on trust and everybody works inside of that trust contract, that your organization can do things you may not have believed even possible at this point.
Yeah, I was just going to add another word. And I think we tend to look at industry from an insider risk perspective as a tool problem or a technology problem. But if you're looking at the fundamental equation, which is people behavior, because that's what insider risk is all about. It's people doing either malicious or unintentional that's causing harm. And trust is one of the foundation equations that every organization needs to look at in terms of mitigation. So if you have the ability to do that, they'll make it so much easier for your business to reduce the risk and potential incidents. So with that, look, I'll wish you a great day. Reach out to us if you need help. And Peter, look, thanks again.
Pleasure.
One more thing. So the next video, and you really want to watch this one, because now what we're going to be doing is we're going to start talking about specific behaviors. The next video is going to be all about predisposition and what it actually means, and then we'll follow up with specific behaviors, and it'll make all sense when we've talked about rapport, beliefs and values and communications. So it all comes together. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Great.
See ya.